Welcome to Public Safety Talk Radio, the podcast for all of our heroes in public safety, including law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, healthcare workers, and more. This show is produced by the POCUA and is founded upon its Soundness Initiative.
This episode is sponsored by Police Mortgage. Police Mortgage is a full-service mortgage company dedicated to serving police officers and first responders. Founded in 2008, Police Mortgage offers a variety of mortgage products tailored to meet the needs of those who serve and protect. Police Mortgage, for first responders who are second to none.
Hi, I'm Ken Bader, your host for Public Safety Talk Radio, and as usual, we have another great guest, and it's a great intersection of what I always like. I like to say I love talking to police officers, I love talking to entrepreneurs, and I love talking to fellow podcasters, and we have at least two, probably three out of the three here. So we have Paul Pantani, who was born in New York City and raised in Southern California. Looks like he likes these cities with a ton of crime so he can do his work. And his lifelong dream of career in law enforcement immediately after high school, joining the police department in 1988 with over 3 decades of dedicated service. Thank you, Paul. He's embraced various roles, and as I see here, he's done a lot of things. He was an FDO, he was a range instructor, he was a bicycle patrol officer. Maybe we can dig into that. And he is also the host of the Transition Drill podcast, which we will drill into, pun intended. Paul, welcome to the show, man.
Ken, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, love it, love it. I know you probably had 18 roles that I didn't even talk about in that bio.
Well, the one that I carry I'll say the most apprehension about is you referred to me as a great guest. That's a heavy load to bring to this.
It is. It is. But, as I like to say in many of my podcasts, I say, we never have a bad guest. I mean, I've had some bad interviews, but it's never necessarily been a bad guest. If it's that bad, it probably isn't going to get aired, so nobody will know. So when you were on bicycle patrol, did you ever catch a perp riding on the bike?
Riding on their bicycle?
No, you were doing bicycle patrol, I read. So did you ever catch up to like a mugger or just general bad guys selling drugs on a bike?
There were a lot of little things. The bike patrol for my agency was a collateral assignment. So it was just kind of one of those things where once you got the training, hey, go throw the bike on the bike rack on the car. And then when you feel like it, pull it off the car and go riding around. And so because I like to work night shift, a lot of times what I do is I try to go skulking around either closed businesses or apartment complexes. But no, unfortunately, I never really came across anything noteworthy. Because at the flip side to it, you're sitting there going, I'm riding around a bicycle at night by myself. I'd rather be in my car.
Yeah, that sounds like a bad plan. I just figured you might make up a story next time. Because I mentioned before we pressed record, Robert Garland, who was a New York City detective, runs Fund the First. We've had him on the show, friend of the show, and he tells stories of how he used to do undercover and be on a skateboard in Lower Manhattan catching drug dealers. That's kind of fun.
Yeah, the equal part to it was, like you mentioned, I came into law enforcement in 1988, not as a police officer, so I'm not that old, but yes, I spent over 30 years in law enforcement. And you're talking about the middle 90s where bike patrol was just starting to kind of become a thing. So agencies didn't even really know what they wanted to use it for. Just everybody around was like, oh, let's do bike patrol. And on top of it, I didn't work for a beach city. It wasn't like that. Remember, there was an old TV show about the guys riding down by the beach and stuff, where if anything, you were just looking good on your bike and seeing all the bikinis and that type of stuff. I was working for a small city. It was just something new. So it was one of those things where we were learning as we were going. And I just kind of went, I'm going to not really adopt it too much.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in where I live in Long Beach, California, I really wish there'd be more LBPD bike patrol because there's some interesting stuff on that bike path in between my neighborhood and downtown Long Beach
So
sometimes.
true.
But they're also pretty short staffed, so we'll give them a pass on the whole bike path. But let's dig in first. You're wearing the shirt for those of you that are only listening and not watching this on YouTube. Paul's wearing this very handsome Transition Drill podcast sweatshirt. I'm sure they're available for sale. But talk about the Transition Drill podcast that you do and the motivation for launching that.
It, in a simplest terms, has become a passion project of mine. I never thought, and you could probably attest to this, I never thought I would get so much out of doing a podcast from a personal standpoint. So I definitely wanted to put that out first. How it came about was it was an internal project at my last agency. I worked for a district attorney's office, worked for an elected official. We were in the middle of COVID. It was late 2020 into early 2021. And my then chief came up with this idea of creating a network of our retirees who could be available for those still working coming to their retirement who wanted to go on and do something different than law enforcement.
Mhm.
And so this network of retirees would be available as a resource. And because it was COVID and everything being done over Zoom, we started this in-house project. We called them lunchtime chats. And I took the lead on it because I listened to podcasts and I was like, oh, this sounds kind of interesting. And after doing a couple of these, I started getting emails offline. Now, granted, all the people listening were just in-house employees, but I was getting emails offline going, hey, you really do a good job. You should think about doing a podcast. And that's literally where it started from, was just somebody kind of feeding me the idea that you might be pretty good at this. Like I said, I had listened to podcasts for a long time. I enjoyed them very much. And so then I just got on that conveyor belt, so to speak, of learning everything that it would take to do a podcast, because I had no experience audio video recording prior to this.
Yeah, yeah, it's podcasting in general from somebody that's done it for almost 10 years and has even written for Podcast Magazine. Definitely has to start with passion because because certainly, resources coming in for it doesn't come in till later and there's other things around the podcast. But yeah, I really love the idea of transition drill, and you could speak to this a lot better than I can because I've heard I remember hearing a disturbing number. It might have been at the last Wounded Blue conference where they talked about the death rate of police officers after they retire. That they retire and I forget what the number is, but it's something astounding, like within 3 years they're dead. And I just say, wow, that's ridiculous. And it has to do with the mental state and not being able to, probably using your words, to transition to something else that's also of value, that they have passion for, that gives them self-worth and so forth. Do you ever cover any of that in the podcast, or do you see any of that out there where it helps to transition to something?
A very simple answer is yes. And that's
Yeah,
ultimately the backbone of the podcast. When I got it, let me go back to what you were saying.
please.
Historically, in my career, that is something that we have always heard. Men or women, they retire, they leave law enforcement, and within 4 or 5 years, they're dead. You combine that with the increase in the number of those taking their lives today, both the
Hmm.
veteran and the first responder side. It is, I don't want to call it an epidemic, but it is a problem for both of these careers and these entities. In a simplest term, I honestly believe that for a lot of men and women in these careers, they make these careers their identity and they don't really have a plan for what is going to be afterwards.
Hmm.
Their retirement plan simply is, I'm going to get to this date on the calendar.
Yeah.
That's what they're aiming for. If anybody who's worked in these careers for any length of time, you know who I'm talking about. That man or that woman that comes to work and they're a bit disgruntled, They're not the nicest to be around, and they literally are just counting down the days, but there's nothing beyond that.
Right.
So that I think is the biggest issue, is losing that purpose once you take the uniform off, once you hang up that identity that was you for so many years, and now you've got to find something else to do. Combining that with when I first decided to kick off the podcast, and this is where the backbone came from, is start thinking today about your transition, about what you're going to do tomorrow. Have a backup plan. We talked about a mutual friend of ours, Shiloh. I remember
Mm-hmm.
when she was a trainee of mine, and back then having the desire to get into psychology and
Mm-hmm.
asking me during training, should I do this? And my advice was, yes, 100%. Go do something education wise that's completely unrelated to what you're doing now. To narrow it down, don't
Mm-hmm.
go get a criminal justice degree if you're already doing law enforcement work, because when you leave law enforcement, a criminal justice degree offers you no career benefits.
Unless
So,
you want to do a criminal justice podcast.
unless you want to do a criminal justice podcast. And so, when I decided to put this podcast together, that was what I was thinking. I want to start getting the message out of the importance of start planning for your tomorrow, start planning for your transition. Now, very narrow mindedness, because I was in law enforcement, my thought process was, let me just talk to other police officers who have made their transition from these careers. Well,
Mm-hmm.
then it blossomed a little bit, and like, okay, I'll just talk to first responders because I related to them. One of the things that helped me, though, because I was working for an elected official when I decided to start the podcast, was I had to get permission to be able to do it. Many
Mm-hmm.
companies will say, hey, that's great. You want to do a podcast, but you're an employee of our company, so no.
Yeah.
Went to our in-house legal counsel, explained everything that I wanted to do with the podcast, and they were extremely supportive. I
Nice.
mean, 100% supportive. Go for it. And it was that conversation with that in-house counsel, with that in-house attorney, who went, you can talk to veterans too? And it was like somebody threw the biggest light switch. And it was so obvious, because the one thing that we both share is they do a great job of recruiting us in. They show us
Mm-hmm.
all the cool things we can do when we're first walking in the door. But when it's time to leave, hey, there's the door. It was nice knowing you. The
Yeah.
train's going to keep going.
Yeah. Good
The
luck to
other
you.
the, the other thing is, you could have the perfect plan. I'm going to do 20, I'm going to do 30. The problem with these careers, and I loosely say a problem, tomorrow can literally be your tomorrow with these careers.
Mm-hmm.
You blow out a back, you blow out your knee, not to the point that your life is debilitated, that you can't live your life, but it's enough of an injury where these organizations say, you just can't play on this team anymore.
Yeah.
So you always need to be thinking, what's my tomorrow? What's my tomorrow? What's my transition going to be from these careers? Start thinking about it today. Start putting those pieces in places today for when you get to that transition point.
Are you looking for a podcast to answer some financial questions? Well, then check out the Mortgage Beat podcast, brought to you by Police Mortgage, for first responders who are second to none. Mortgage Beat gives insight into the home loan process specifically for police officers, firefighters, and other public safety professionals. The podcast is hosted by Police Mortgage CEO John Aritos, who has decades of experience in the mortgage industry. Check out Mortgage Beat on Spotify today.
So many great points. One in particular that really resonated with me is we had the pleasure of having Frank McCaha on a couple weeks ago, I believe, and he runs a business, helping people become police officers. But he talks about his transition in that he loved being a cop, and he had a shoulder injury where he wisely came to the realization that I could be a liability out there to my partner, and myself. This, as much as I love this job, I just can't do this. And fortunately, he transitioned into, a role that he's very passionate about and helps a lot of people. But unfortunately, not everybody has that great story. And I want to dig into a little bit the mental and physical challenges of transitioning as a police officer or general first responder. And to give a little bit of context, many times we talk about the retiree, but sometimes there are folks that put in, 5, 10, 15 years, and they say that they might be, 38 years old, and like, I'm done with this, but I'm not done. And other friends of the of public safety talk radio, the gals at Sheepdog Resume, they see this all the time. Somebody is like 38 years old, and they're a captain or have built up to a certain rank and a certain pay in the police department, and that says, well, I just want to go work for Microsoft. I should be able to make at least another 20,000, and I should be on the executive level because I ran the SWAT team and this and that. And like, well, you know what? Unfortunately, the corporate world, while some in most may very well respect what you did, when it comes to the job, they don't really care. And you're starting at 60 grand and you ain't managing anybody. So talk a little bit to the mental and physical, especially the mental challenge. Let's start there. The mental challenges of making a transition.
Well, you hit on a lot of good points, and I want to make sure
Every
that
once in a while I do that, but maybe I should do my own. I
you
do my own podcast, but anyhow, go
you
ahead.
you, you and I are in the same boat. We both have like, wow, I really said that. That's intelligent.
Yeah, yeah, it's when you lose the hair, you automatically get
The
more
brain
knowledge, I think.
expands.
Yeah, exactly.
So the first thing I'm going to say is what you were talking about, which I believe is very important. And this is something that's really become more important for me the last few years of my career and then the time that I've been doing this podcast. And I finished off my career at a senior level management position. So I was now in the position of caring for the men and women that I was working with. And it became very important for me to stress the importance of taking care of yourself,
Mhm,
taking care of your mental health, taking care of your physical health as you approach your retirement, as you approach your transition. Because even if your plan is, I just want to go play golf and hang out with my grandkids, that's
mhm,
great. But be in the best mental space you can, be in the best physical space you
mhm,
can. Now, the other part of that, yes, these careers are very physically demanding. And unfortunately, sometimes you will exit these careers carrying some injury baggage with you. The only thing I can say to that is do all that you can to try to stay healthy.
mhm,
One of the using the veteran component and the first responder component as a comparison, for many of the people that I know that operate in the first responder community, primarily law enforcement, very few agencies have a physical fitness requirement once you get out of the academy. It's
mhm,
purely on you to maintain your physical fitness. I was fortunate that I found the tactical world, the SWAT world, where it forced me in that environment to maintain a level of physical fitness, besides the fact that I just enjoyed working out.
mhm,
The other component to that, though, is that's where the positive comes in with the veteran community, because the entire time you're in the military, you need to hit minimal physical standards. So I would like to see something like that. So that's the physical component. Do everything you can while you're in these careers to keep yourself in as best of shape as you can. I understand that as you get older, you start having a family, your kids start becoming a demand on you, the shifts become a demand on you. It does get harder. And the best explanation that I ever heard from a former coworker of mine who was an avid runner, he got up during a if you've heard of it, Baker to Vegas relay
mhm.
race.
Oh yeah.
He gave
Mhm,
the pre-race pep talk. And he said it best, in my opinion. He goes, I'm sure a lot of you look at me and think that running is the number one thing in my life. I wake up every morning and that's all I want to do. And he said, no. As a matter of fact, it's farthest from number one. The only thing is, it's right above being lazy and doing nothing. So you just need to put your fitness right above that point where it's you'd rather sit on the couch and just watch TV.
Yeah.
Just give it that nudge. The other thing that I think you said that you did say that I think is very important. These careers are very demanding on us. You come into them young. Maybe you get a taste of it. Maybe you're 5 years in, maybe you're 10 years in, and you're saying to yourself, I'm not going to make another 10 years. I'm not going to make another 20 years. First and most important, if you choose to walk away from these careers, do not think that you're a failure. Do not think that you did not succeed. Listen to yourself. Listen to that little voice in your head. If it's telling you this isn't for you, if it's a matter of, you mentioned, I want to go work for Microsoft. If for whatever reason that itch is something you want to scratch, all I would say is, as soon as you start thinking about it, start doing any type of training class. Bolster your knowledge in whatever you would like to go do so that you can take the skills and experience you've got in these careers, combine with the education and training in that next career, and go give it a try. Have the confidence to say, you know what? I don't need to do this for 20 or 30 years. I'm going to go give that a try. But like you said, just simply because we are in a position, say, of leadership or of experience in these careers does not necessarily mean that it equates and carries over. We do bring some amazing skills and talents to a table. We bring responsibility, dedication. We can be given a task and that task is going to get done. But there's the nuances of moving into the civilian world, speaking like a civilian, operating in a civilian world, getting the degrees and the certificates that, though it doesn't guarantee that you can do the job, they like to see that box checked on a resume or on an application. So take that step back, see what you would need to get that job, whatever it is. Take the time, get the training, get the education, and then go apply for those jobs. From the day you start in these careers, stockpile some money. Put some money away in an account that you don't touch, that you don't look at, that you don't dip into, and make that your safety net. So if you do get to that point 10 years down the road where you're thinking about, man, I'd really like to go do something, 99.9% of the men and women who get to that point, the biggest reason why they don't try is because, like, I can't afford to. I got my family, I got my bills. So have that stockpile of money that gives you that financial freedom to go, you know what? I can make it for 6 months. I'm going to go give this a try.
Yep. Yeah, I think to kind of sum up a little bit, what I'm hearing you say, and you're spot on, is have a plan.
Yes.
Have a financial plan. If you've got 6 months of salary sitting in an account, you could try a few things. Have a plan, mentally that, hey, it ain't gonna be the same thing. Even if you're not dealing with PTSD, PTSI, some kind of an emotional issue, you're still going into a different environment. And the physical, one of the things that, I always tell my business clients is, don't let what you can't do keep you from doing what you can do. I mean, I've never been in the military. I've never been a first responder, but I'm 55 years old. I can't run anymore because of a bad back. There's other things that I just can't do. But at least on average 6 days a week, I'm in the gym, and I'm on the elliptical, I'm out with the weights, where I'm seated and so on and so forth, and I'm doing it at 55. And it's amazing, I'll see people actually that were first responders that are in their 50s, and I'll say, well, I'm no big deal, I can bench press X, I just did that at the gym. And they're like, wow, you could do that? I haven't been able to do that in 10 years. I'm like, all right, well, I feel kind of good about myself. So I think it's, have a plan, and don't let what you can't do keep you from doing what you can do.
I would add to that of whatever your body's physical limitations are on you and your ability to do what maybe you used to do, you might not be able to,
Yeah.
but do the most that you can with what your body will allow you to do.
Yeah.
Don't get to a point where like, oh, my back's messed up, so I can't run anymore, but I'm not going to do anything.
Hmm.
Work within the limitations, because obviously you have certain injuries that are going to dictate you. Having a strong mind is one thing, but if your body's going, I'm not going to cooperate, you're not going to gain anything. All you're going to do is continue to injure yourself. I
Right.
don't want to sound like the cliche. I got into jujitsu at 51 years old. I've
Hmm.
been doing it now, coming up on 5 years. I absolutely love it. It's so much fun. I enjoy it. Get in there with the young guys, get in there with people my age, but it's
Hmm.
fun. It's just find those things that
Yeah.
you enjoy doing. It shouldn't be whatever your exercise is, should not be something that you begrudgingly do.
Yeah.
If you want to get on a bike, then get on a bike, but just do something.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a weird way, I just enjoy being at the gym.
Mhm.
I look forward to it. And I think part of it is, I know people that, need a buddy and like to do a workout with somebody. It's like, I just enjoy putting the music on and just being in my own head for like, 40 minutes to an hour doing that, just being, on my own. I got a buddy that, is my age that literally, was so heavy, he almost died from blood clots in his lung. And, now he weighs half the size and he's just doing it by diet and walking. And he talks, to me now about how much he just enjoys walking, and clearing his head and not being, not that he doesn't love his family and friends, but just being alone and being able to be with his own thoughts. So I think it's important, whatever that it is, there's plenty of ways to just, not necessarily be, you run a marathon or do an Ironman, but there's plenty of ways to do something and find something that you enjoy. Maybe it's, axe throwing, maybe it's axe throwing, at your neighbor's wall because you don't like them, whatever it is. I wouldn't recommend that, but, hey, if you're an ex-cop, you probably have some connections.
One of the things that I will say is, and I'm a big proponent of this, and I was forced into it, is if you have the space, put a gym in your garage or
Hmm.
in your house somewhere. In 2018, I had double hernia surgery. And I remember coming back from that and telling my wife, I can't go back to a box gym because I know I'm going to get in there and I'm going to ego lift. I need to be able
Hmm.
to come back and have the 5 pound dumbbells and, doing the body weight stuff and not having in my mind that judgment of other people looking at me.
Hmm.
9 years later now, I don't think I will ever go back to a box gym.
Yeah.
And the joke that I tell people is I like knowing that if I put a dumbbell down on the floor of my gym and I go have a sandwich, guess where that dumbbell is going to be 2 hours later when I come back? Right where it was. I
Yeah.
don't have to worry about getting up and getting into my gym and going, oh, are the 35 pound dumbbell? Oh, somebody's using the. So
Yeah.
that's just me. I've become a huge proponent of it. If you've got the space and it's just right there in your backyard or in your garage or wherever it's at, it makes it so much more convenient.
I live in a 700 square foot house, so building a gym in the house just isn't an option. But when COVID hit and my gym shut down, like all gyms shut down, I ordered a crap load of exercise bands on Amazon, and you could get a damn good workout. Exercise bands that went from 10 pounds to 80 pounds. And sometimes to this day, there'll be a day it's like, I want to do something, but I actually don't feel like going to the gym today. I'm gonna bring out these bands. I'm gonna watch, Daredevil Born Again or something, and I'm gonna do, a full workout. And I find too that sometimes it's a nice change of pace from the dumbbells and the machines because you're working other muscles, and it's not better or worse. It's just a different workout. So there's always an option out there.
And I'm really a proponent of kettlebells.
Oh
There's
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
much you can do with a couple kettlebells. So again, kind of wrapping up what you're saying, just do something and work within what your body will allow you to do.
Yeah, well, you're more advanced than I am because the kettlebells are intimidating to me. But I'm thinking, I'm gonna wave this 30-pound kettlebell and I'm gonna wind up cracking my head open or something. But anyhow,
You'll only do it
probably.
once.
Yeah, yeah. My at 55, with some of the stuff I do in the gym, my wife is already scared. It's like, don't do that. Anyhow, so I think introducing kettlebells may be out of the question for at least a while. But let's get into, what's you do the podcasts. I know you talk to a lot of people that are either in transition, have transitioned, or are thinking about transitioning. For those folks that are somewhere in that spectrum, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen in somebody looking to or beginning a transition?
As we talked about earlier, one of the common themes in not the majority, a large number of my
Hmm.
guests is either not having a plan or over relying on what they thought their skill sets would carry over to
Hmm.
in the civilian world. Like you mentioned earlier, just simply or assuming that because I'm a sergeant, because I'm making X dollars, because I've got 25 years of experience, that all I've got to do is simply drop an application on the table. I don't, matter of fact, I don't even need to do that. They're going to come banging down my door for a job. It's not like that.
Yeah.
There is, like I said, there are skills that we bring to the table and we are valuable, but you still need to make yourself marketable. So, if I could say one common theme that I have dealt with in a lot of the guests is it's the split. There's those who had a plan and maybe it didn't necessarily come to fruition like they planned it, but they still kept pushing forward. Or it was the guests who, man, I got to my transition date and I thought it would be easy. I'll just be able to go and get another job. And all of a sudden, 3 months goes by, 6 months goes by, several people a year goes by, and they couldn't find a job. Now, there's other factors that you need to be thinking about.
Hmm.
Not as much for the first responder community, but it is an impact more maybe at the federal level.
Hmm.
Maybe you're an FBI agent and you're assigned to the LA field office. You're about to transition out, but you want to go back home to Indiana or you want to go back to Texas where home is. Well, if where you want to go back to doesn't have available jobs, then what are you going to do? Or the other component, you transition out and it's in the back of your mind, hey, I'm going back home to Texas, but your wife and your kids who are maybe not finished with high school yet go, we don't want to go to Texas. So there's the
Hmm.
communication aspect. You got to incorporate your family into your transition planning. You need to be talking to your spouse. Hey, what's your plan for
Hmm.
when I shut down this job? So it all revolves around planning, and it's more than just thinking about it in your head. It's communicating it to your spouse, to your family. It's putting it down on paper, getting input from other people. Hey, what would be a good job for me? Or I'm interested in whatever job you do. Can you teach me about the specifics of the ins and outs of your job? Would it even be something that I would want to do? There's so much to think about the planning of the transition from these careers.
Yeah, yeah, so much to unpack with that, Paul. I mean, everything spot on. Yeah, I think especially when it comes to transitioning careers. And while never having been a first responder, I started my career in finance and banking. Never really liked it that much. And with degrees and credentials and everything else, even you make a plan and you think, oh, well, this shouldn't be that hard to get into this industry or that industry. And yes, let's not discount the fact that there are complementary skills, transitional skills, like leadership and other abilities that are going to apply in other industries, maybe even all industries. But that isn't as obvious to people in these other industries as you think it is. Unfortunately, I found that out I found the solution of I'll just going to start my own business and do my own thing, but that's not for everybody. If you really are looking into a different industry, from law enforcement, from firefighting, from the military, do those skills transfer? Sure, absolutely. But you have to, and I learned this from some other folks, and you could speak to this, you have to speak to those skills in their language, number one, and number two, apply it to their situation. Yeah, I did this in law enforcement, but this is how it applies at Google. This is how it applies at United Healthcare. Yeah, this is how it would apply at this architectural firm, whatever it is.
So going back to something that you said that I think is really important is even you commented, you got into finance because you thought you were going to enjoy it. You got into it and you didn't enjoy it.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, and this is where the personal side of things come in, and this is where looking in the mirror comes in. We might have an idea of what we want to do, but inevitably, there's no utopia job. No job is ever going to be perfect.
There's not.
Not that I've found
I'm
yet.
still looking for it, Paul. Don't
So
tell
am
me
I.
it's not out there.
And when I find it, I'll share it with you.
Yeah.
But that's the big component to really think about is don't think that just because you're going to be walking into another career that it's going to be perfect and you're going to be perfectly happy. You might get into it and go, "Ooh, this isn't for me." Don't be afraid to make that pivot and transition away from it. Don't stay in a job that you're not enjoying just because you feel stuck. The other thing is, it goes back to that planning aspect. So
Mhm.
many of us talk to our buddies, and our buddy goes, "Oh, hey, I got this job at this, and it's great over here." They're not telling you all of the bad side of it. So you just take them at their face value, and then you go apply for that job, and you go, "Man, you didn't tell me about this or this." So do your own research. Don't go
Yeah.
in blind. And then, like you said, take the time when you're doing your resume, when you're filling out an application, when you're going into these interviews, practice translating what you did in the first responder career into civilian speak. You
Mhm.
know, they're big on accomplishments. So it's not just, "Hey, I was the sergeant of the narcotics team."
Mhm.
No, they want to know more. "I led 12 people. We conducted X number of search warrants a year. We, resulted in this many arrests." They want the
Yeah.
bigger story. And so you've really got to learn that think of, if there's a word to remember, is translate.
Yeah.
Translate what you did into the civilian world.
Yeah. Perfect point there, and great way to kind of encapsulate it. As we begin to wrap up a little bit, I'm sure we probably already hit on it, but I like to ask this of most guests as we begin to end our great conversation, and it has been a great conversation. Is there a number one tip out there? If somebody comes to you, says, "Hey, I listened to your podcast, I've talked to you, offline or what have you, and this is kind of what I'm thinking of transitioning." Is there a number one tip where you say, you really need to do X? If that's the case, what might X be?
For me, it would be sit down and really think about what drives you.
Hmm.
What gives you purpose every single day? What do you want to accomplish in your next life? And then start building from there. Like you mentioned, if you're tired of the bureaucracy, if you're tired of the shift work, if you're tired of answering to a boss, maybe it's your own business. If you're driven by, I've seen so much in these careers of men and women taking their own lives. I want to do something to
Hmm.
change that, to turn back those numbers. Maybe you need to get into the nonprofit space. Man, you know what? I have loved cooking my entire life, and I cook in the backyard every single weekend. Maybe it's time to go to culinary school.
Yeah.
Stop thinking about, I do this career so I can only do X job. Find that little voice inside you of what's really going to make you happy. You know, is it being a surf instructor on a beach in Hawaii?
Right.
That may not pay the bills. But if you've done good investing and saving, maybe you can do that. So it's finding that little voice inside of you, what really is going to give you purpose and drive every day once you leave these careers, and can you find a way to make it profitable to
Yeah.
support you and your family?
Yeah, it's as many times we talk about in business is there's an intersection of what you're really good at, what you're passionate about doing, and will people pay for it, and can you make money at it? It's kind of those three circles and that intersection in between. And you made the great point, if you've been good financially with investments and retirement funds and so forth, maybe that third circle of making money at it really isn't as important, because you know what, you're being taken care of, and you've got the passion and you've got the skill for it.
If I can add one thing real quick,
Yes, well,
and it's
you can add two or three things. Add as many things as you want, Paul.
well, a good business analogy that I've recently heard is when you sit down to think about what you want to do next, think about a problem in whatever environment. Is it in your community? Is it within an organization like yours that is repeated across many organizations? Wherever there's a problem, if you can identify it and create the solution for it, you can make a marketable product. So,
Yep.
different aspect or a different way to think about it. If you can identify a problem and create the solution, you can maybe create a business for yourself.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge entrepreneurial axiom that, me and many other people, I didn't come up with the idea, but many people have talked about for decades, is you want to be successful, solve a problem. That's your first start and thought. Um, speaking of thoughts, you had a thought at the very beginning of our conversation that maybe you wouldn't be a great guest, but you are a great guest. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. Could go a lot longer, but you've got people to help in podcasts to produce yourself. So before we let you go, how can people best find a Paul Pantani out there? But the Transition Drill podcast, if they want to hire you to speak, if they want to hire you to help, personally, how best can they find Paul out there?
The simplest way is, for me personally, my website, transitiondrillpodcast.com. I'm on all social media: LinkedIn, Paul Pantani; Instagram, Paul Pantani; Twitter, Paul Pantani. I don't think anybody's really posted on Twitter much anymore. From the podcast perspective, any of your major podcast platforms, Transition Drill Podcast; YouTube, Transition Drill Podcast. I also do a secondary component, but you can still find it under, it's called the Tactical Transition Tips. It's just individual episodes of me providing tips that are geared towards what I call the close range group, the group that's transitioning in a year or less, the medium range group, the groups that are looking to transition in 5 years or so, and the long range group, the ones just starting their careers who have got a decade or more ahead of them. And so you can find those episodes, but it's all under the Transition Drill Podcast.
Awesome. Paul, you really have been a great guest. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you for all you do for first responders out there. It's really valuable, my friend.
I appreciate the invite. I appreciate sharing the time with you, and it was great getting to talk to you.
Absolutely. The pleasure was definitely all mine. Thank you again. And thank you to all of you who've either watched or listened to this episode of Public Safety Talk Radio. And we'll be back with you next week with another great guest. Public Safety Talk Radio is produced by the POCUA. POCUA is a consortium of financial institutions serving law enforcement as well as other first responders and public safety professionals. To learn more about our association and to find one of our credit unions or service providers near you, go to www.policecreditunions.com. And always remember, if you aren't working with one of our POCUA credit unions, you're just banking with an institution that just so happens to serve first responders. As a public safety professional, you and your family deserve better. Find a POCUA credit union today.